This podcast is exclusively created for men searching for greater ways to connect to their queen and children on a deeper level and build keystone habits that will impact and enhance their movement, mindset, spirit, lifestyle, business, and legacy. Fathers of the Future is about the power of true, authentic storytelling with one sole purpose: to build a better dad. My name is Luke Kayyem, and I am a father of the future. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll with Robert Scovill.
No, Scoville.
Yeah, but the sex, drugs, and rock and roll is...
That part's accurate.
That's about accurate.
That part's accurate.
Let me start out by saying that in my 40 years of life, I've had a very small amount of males, mentors, men that I trust, that I like, that I appreciate, that I love spending time with. And you're one of them, man. It's an absolute honor to have you on this mic.
See, that freaks me out because I think back to the first time that we ever met, and for me to even possibly envision that we would be sitting here doing this right now, I mean, it's so far away from that moment. It's not even funny.
We're talking 9 years ago.
It was right when I started my fitness quest. So yes, right about 9 years ago now. Yeah.
And did you Google CrossFit? How did you find it?
No, we had a mutual friend who brought us together. Bill.
Yep. Bill.
Right. He brought me in because we both, it's funny how these little things start. It starts with such a seed. I was at a party at Bill's house. Somehow the subject matter came up of doing the Alcatraz swim. And I said, "They let you do that?"
Wow.
He was like, "Yeah, I did it last year." I was like, "I want to do it. Yeah. I absolutely want to do it." And he goes, "Well, you got to start training then." And
it is.
The next week we were in your room there.
It was Bill, which is crazy. Talk about full circle. Years later, or a few years back, you inspired me to start swimming as we met at the local pool. And of course, being an extreme person, I went home and Googled races because if I was going to swim in a pool, I needed it to be a purpose behind it.
Yeah, purpose, please, yes.
And I found the Alcatraz swim, which I was able to do in both 2017 and 18.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenal. I tell people all the time, you got to have experiential-based learning and teaching and, these crucibles or evolutions that you go through, things that you prepare and train for.
Yeah.
And we also got to do World's Toughest Mudder together.
Right.
It's a 24-hour obstacle course race. But these are the things that move us to not only do the work that's often challenging, but they awaken us and move us in life.
For me, there's a little bit of validation that comes with doing those kind of things for me, but it validates my process. It doesn't necessarily validate me as a man. I don't need that, but it validates process for me because I think overall I'm a person who believes that as a human being, you can do anything. If you can find the information, you can train, you can learn about it. Look, I'm not a brain surgeon. I guarantee if I did the studying and everything else, I could be one if I wanted it bad enough. So, I apply that to everything physical as well. It's like, well, if you train the right way, why can't I do that? Who's going to stop me from doing that?
Just you, right? Just me. Yeah.
And it kind of comes, it's one of the things I love about the athletic stuff we do, especially things like World's Toughest and Alcatraz. I'm an only kid and I've always relished those kind of non-team sports. There's something right about that for me. When I was a kid, I wrestled, something about that kind of one-on-one thing. It's just you. There's nobody to lay it on but you. There's something attractive about that for me. I like that. I like that kind of pressure.
Yeah. And to take it back to sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you've spent the last 40 years doing what?
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man. What more do you need to know, right? No, I've been in the music business since I was a teenager. It was a lifelong quest for me. I knew I wanted to get involved in the music business probably since I was a teenager, freshman in high school, that kind of thing. It was one of those rare things where I got a glimpse at what that life was like working, not on stage. I started out kind of as a musician, but not too long after really kind of going after the musician thing, got a glimpse into the production side of the world. at a concert, funny enough, and it really set me on my path where I was like, okay, that's what I want to do right there.
Who did you see?
I've actually told this story before, and it's pretty cool. So I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version of this. But I went to see Supertramp when it was probably 1974.
And for those of you that were born after 1988, Reader's Digest was an analog manual that was sold at the checkout at grocery stores that told you what TV shows, or no, that's a TV guide.
Yes, TV guide.
Yeah, but they were similar. They were next to each other.
Reader's Digest was always a condensed version of a book, right? So, where was I going with it? Oh, I went to see Supertramp, and as we were walking out of the place, we had great seats. And I remember during the show just listening and going, wow, what's going on here? I mean, this sounds unbelievable, you know? I mean, this is not just a band up on stage. It was like the first time I kind of connected those dots, that somebody else was contributing to what I was experiencing, you know? And sure enough, as we were walking out, I walked right by the soundboard, you know, the mixing console, and it just stopped me in my tracks. I remember looking and thinking, wow, what is this? And the guy who was mixing Supertramp, I think he just picked up on my vibe, and he looked at me, he goes, you want to come up and have a look around? And he kind of gave me just, you know, the 20,000 foot flyby on the thing. His name was Russell Pope. And I didn't know that it was Russell Pope at the time. I didn't even know who Russell Pope was at the time. I would learn over the next few years. So long story short is that kind of set me on my path. I get into the business. I do really well. I'm very successful. You know, I've created a good name for myself. It's 38 years later. I'm doing an internet radio show on how I got in the business, you know, and I tell this story. And a friend of mine who I had toured with in the 80s lives in Finland. God, this is going to get so drawn out. And he hears the broadcast, and he Facebooks me. Like that day, he goes, I live right down the street from Russell Pope. Goes and tells Russell Pope the story, and Russell goes, yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday.
Wow.
And he recounted it. I mean, I was like, no way does he remember this. We connect on Facebook and recount that whole story 37 years later, right? Wow. And he knew who I was.
Yeah.
He didn't know that I was that kid.
Yeah.
Until
that
he
put the two together. Wow. Right. You've had an illustrious career, to say the least. And I want to take it back before we go into the most recent touring year with you to that 19-year-old self.
Yeah.
You go to your first concert, you see, touch, and feel the soundboard. And then you go back home, and a few years later, you show up in Hollywood, or at that time, where was all this happening? Where was music being created back then?
You know, it's funny because I heard you mention this the other day, either in a post or something, you know, talking about failing 1,000 times rather than not trying. And, you know, when I went to see that concert, I was a freshman in high school. I was 14, you know, and all through, it kind of set me on fire. I was like, I got to figure out how to get in this business, whatever. Ended up going to a technical college in Kansas City. And while I was there, I got kind of hooked up loosely with a sound company there and kind of started to get my first tip into the water, you know. And at some point I had just the awakening of, if I'm going to make it in this business, it won't be here in Kansas City. I've got to go to Los Angeles, or I've got to go to New York and do this. And I remember having this conversation with my mom because she was all freaked out, you know, what do you mean you're going to go to Los Angeles? I have to go and try. If I fail, I'll sleep well every night after that. I will not be able to live with myself if I don't go. It's 2,000 miles away. Let's get in the car and drive. I mean, let me pack up my furniture and go. I'll figure it out when I get there, you know. And sure enough, that's how it all worked out, you know. I mean, you can kind of, you know, if you kind of timelined my entire career, you could come up with these little touchstone moments of it. And that was certainly one of it, you know.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of saying, you know, fear of not trying was way scarier than fear of failure. Way scarier, you know.
And if you get started at 19, did you work for any big names right away, or did it take some time to break into that?
Yeah, no, I was fortunate enough to have some things fall in my lap pretty handily, pretty readily. Probably my first really big break was working for this band out of Kansas City called Shooting Star. And they had already signed a big deal. They had one record out already, and they were really doing really, really well. And, you know, I mean, I don't want to say I've wrestled with this, but it's always kind of validated my thinking of, and we've talked about this a couple of times, is when opportunity knocks, you have to be ready. Mm-hmm. It's too late to prepare once opportunity knocks, right? So, you know, all of my life from that 14-year-old piece up until 19, 20 years old was about preparing for that moment when it showed up, you know, and I went in there as a kid. I mean, I was an absolute pup. And just excelled. I mean, I did really, really well there. You know, I mean, the proof was in the pudding, and then was smart enough, honestly, to leverage that into more and more and more work. And, you know, it got me the Mellencamp gig, got me the Go-Go's gig, got me all of those gigs that were to follow for the next few years. It really, really set me on my path, you know. So,
who did you love working with, whether it was the music or the person, early in your career?
There's a couple of instances of that. One of them certainly was, it's kind of funny how these things kind of go in cycles for me in my life. The very first actual concert that I ever got to go see was probably 1973, maybe Alice Cooper, right? Mom took me.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I was 13. I mean, I wasn't going to be able to go. And I if my mom ever hears this, she's going to laugh because she's going to remember it. I remember being in this crowd now think about concerts in 1973, right? I mean,
raw.
Edgy.
Yeah.
Edgy.
Yeah.
Here's Mom, registered nurse, in her polyester outfit, little scarf, sitting next to me, passing joints, you know, down the aisle, just thinking, what am I doing here, right? So this was at a place called Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis. Okay, so like I said, 13. Okay, now you got to fast forward. Got to do the math. 16 years, 13 years, 14 years, something like that. I get an opportunity to mix Alice Cooper.
Wow.
Right. So I'm front of house engineer on the tour. I'm mixing the entire, you know, Nightmare Returns tour, 1984, 85, whatever it was. Where do we go back to? Kiel Auditorium. So I had kind of a moment there, you know, during that show, and my assistant. If Alice ever hears this, he's going to kill me. At one point during the show, I said, I need you to take the console for a few minutes. So he took over, and I went up and sat in the seat where I was at the age of 13 and just took a look at the show and look at where I was. You know, it was just kind of that, let's recalibrate a little bit. You know, things are happening here. You know, it was cool. It was a very, very cool moment.
Have you always had this sort of visual aspect of you of seeing something that you want and then going after it and not stopping till you get it?
Yeah. I've never really had much problem seeing myself doing something. Now, executing it and getting there. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm 100% success rate by no stretch of the imagination, but I can always picture myself doing it. The path to execution is the next piece of it that you got to figure out, right? So have I failed at that sometimes? Sure, without a doubt. But I've never had a problem really kind of seeing myself and go, I could do that.
And your kids are a little bit older now. You have 3?
I have 3. You know, it makes me ask the question, why am I on Fathers of the Future? You know, I mean, I'm an old guy. I should be on Fathers of the Past or maybe Grandfathers of the Future or something like that, right?
Well, I believe that you are here because of your powerful message, because of who you are as a human being. And regardless of the age of your fatherhood, you are a father. And one day you will have 2 boys who grow up to become fathers themselves. So those young men are fathers of the future.
That's true.
Yeah. So
Touché.
It all ties in.
It
all ties in.
Yeah. You did good there. Yeah, that was great. You tied that right together. Well done.
What's it like now, right? A lot of men who come on the show talk about, you know, they just had a kid, their kids are young, but yours are a little bit further off.
Yeah, I mean, kids are an interesting thing for me. Even fatherhood's an interesting thing for me to some degree because I put it off for a while, you know. I mean, I got married later than most guys get married. I think I was not that late now that I think about it. I was in my 30s. But, you know, again, it kind of goes back to that kind of vision quest idea of you kind of see what you want to be and you go for it. You know, guys that did what I did professionally, are typically not family men. That lifestyle doesn't lend itself well to family. It's very consuming. You can be gone for months and months at a time, et cetera. But I remember making a really conscious thought at one point that, okay, I'm going to do that for a living. I feel as strongly as ever that I'm going to do that. But I'm going to be married and I'm going to have a family. I'm going to do those things. I want those things. I wanted to be a father without a doubt.
Before you even met your wife?
Yeah, no doubt. And so, those kind of, the big trifecta was hanging out there. Okay, I've got to figure out how to make all of this work, right? And one of the kind of epiphanies I think I had at one point was, I can't have my kids too early here. Like I've got to get to a certain point in my career before I make that commitment to have those kids. Because if I have the kids and then the career goes sideways, I don't want to have any fuel to resent my kids for that. I want that. I want to own that completely. If I make it, I make it. If I don't make it, I don't make it. It's because of something I did, not one of these kind of extenuating circumstances in your life, So I put it off for a while until I got to a really good place in my career where I felt like, okay, I can sustain this now, maybe even grow, whatever it's going to be. And then we had the kids. And luckily, Mary Jo she certainly seemed to be on board with it. I mean, she was young at the time. She was 7 years my junior, but when we got married. So, she was younger. She wasn't necessarily looking to have kids right away.
And in that path of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you somehow said, you know what, I'm gonna lay off of this stuff because I want this in my life. I want this purpose-driven life to be a part of my family and myself a part of them.
Yeah. Once I met Mary Jo, it was easy to kind of put that down and just kind of go, nah, I'm done with that. I mean, honestly, I'm done with it.
Where'd you guys meet?
We met in Cleveland. I was on tour with Air Supply at the time, and we won't go into all the gory details of it. I think she actually thought I was one of the members of Air Supply. I'm pretty sure. Have you seen that? There's a meme out right now that it's a girl, in tears. She said, she told me he was with the band, or he told me she was with the band, but he's actually the sound guy, that kind of thing. That was me. That was me and her. So. Yeah, she was, Mary Jo's background is in ballet. She was a ballet dancer as a young girl, and then went on to some exotic dancing to keep dancing in her 20s. And, we met through that, just purely on happenstance. But, it sounds like romance run amok. I swear to you it does. But we've both confirmed it. I mean, we both kind of felt it. The moment we made eye connection, there was a connection made there. And I know it's just terrible, corny dribble, but I remember seeing her and thinking, that's going to be the mother of my children right there.
Wow.
I swear I did. Man, the next day I was gone, and we continued and kind of carried on that relationship for months before we were ever in the same room again.
Wow.
But there was some power that came with that because all the physical pretense was gone. I mean, we were always connected on the phone. That had to be kind of real. There was no need to put up any kind of false face or anything like that. And then when we did get together, it was very real, So it was part of that worked out for the better, I think. And
then you get married and you have your first child, who is how old now?
Carleen Nicole, she is 20. I got to do the math here. 22, 23 now. Be 23 this year. Yeah, girl, first time out of the chute.
Yeah,
awesome.
So mom goes to work on having kids, and you are on the road.
I am on the road. And, I would love to take credit for the success of our family, but man, that's on her shoulders. During that period of our life, which was in my 30s, through my early 50s, I was touring. It's like being in the military. You're on a tour of duty. You are gone for months at a time. And, she always says it, but it's accurate. She was a single family housewife whose husband was still alive,
Wow.
It was on her, short of working. Luckily she didn't have to work, financially she didn't have to work to keep this going, but she was responsible for everything in my absence, everything. So, without her, this definitely does not work.
And you still continue to travel today? You're headed, where are you headed tomorrow?
Brazil tomorrow. I'm going down to Rio de Janeiro to do some teaching. Then I'm back. I got a few more trips like that planned out over the next little bit of time.
So it obviously worked out, right?
Yeah, still working out.
Working out,
still
right?
working out.
You're packing up some miles. You've done a lot of miles in your time.
Yeah.
So Carly's born and she's 22, 23 now. Did you guys sit down together and sort of plan out what this family would look like? We want to have 2, we want to have 3, we just keep going.
Oh, I think if it was Mary
Spaced
Jo's
out.
choice, we'd have 10. I mean, she is a natural mother, no doubt about it. I mean, she's got it. She has got the gene. She is just incredible with the kids. But, you know, I mean, that's not to say there's no challenges. Of course, I mean, you're a parent, you get it. I mean, there are tons of challenges that come with it, and we certainly had our share of them. But yeah, I mean, she's incredible with them.
Which is helpful. And we know a lot of people out there who are, you know, coming into this as single fathers or single parents, and maybe they even didn't get married and they have kids now and they're looking at that path. It's always more helpful when you have additional support. But there's a lot of men, in your case, your wife was able to really do a lot of the load for you while you were traveling and working and building up your career. If you look at your career over the past 40 years and you start having kids early in your career, I think you said probably about 8 to 10 years in of doing it, what often came first for you? Knowing that you're traveling for work, you know, and this is FaceTime and Google and emails.
Oh yeah,
and
this was pre-cell phone, man. I mean, come on.
Pre-cell phone.
Pre-computer.
Yeah. How were you able to connect with Mary Jo? Was it just old school phone calls and a lot of those?
Yeah, and we have some pretty funny stories about that because, you know, it's all phones. I mean, like I said, that was just at the very, very tip of the beginning of cell phones. So there was nothing like that. Computer, like the internet and email was just coming online at the end of the 80s and stuff. So, and she certainly didn't have any of those things. So it was all phone. So we had I remember calling her from London one time after a night of partying, carousing, champagne. And, you know, calling from the UK to the United States at that time was very expensive. And if you were calling from a hotel, it was even more expensive. I passed out on the phone. Phone's off the hook. Oh. Was off the hook for another 7-8 hours.
Oh. Do you remember the number?
Oh, yeah. It was $850 some odd dollars for that call. You know, I mean, it was just, you know, things like that, you know, were just crazy. But, you know, kind of getting back to your question, we really we were smart enough, I think, to make a really concerted effort to stay in touch in meaningful ways. I mean, and we knew phone calls weren't going to cut it. Especially when we got to the point where we were really committed to each other. And we just made it kind of cost of business. You know, it's like, okay, if I'm going to be gone for more than 3 weeks at a time, you have to come out. You have to show your face and we have to reconnect. Because I think we just kind of implicitly understood that, okay, we can be on the phone, we can talk to each other, go through all the conversations, but when the phones hang up, then our lives go in very, very different ways. And you know, we are, you know, not victims, but we are made from our experiences. And, you know, when you don't share in each other's experiences off the phone, then you start to grow apart. You absolutely start to grow apart. Yeah. So, you know, we kind of understood that, I think, implicitly. And for many, many years, I mean, if I was going to be gone for more than 3 weeks, I mean, plane ticket, let's go. You got to come out. You got to come out.
Yeah, my wife and I have about a 2-week max. We've both pushed that a few times in the past couple of years. Kilimanjaro was 2 weeks for me. She's spent 2 weeks in Europe. And we have to break out of, when we get back together, it's uncomfortable for a little while, for a few moments, a few hours, maybe even a day or two, until we're able to connect again, even though we did FaceTime and even though we did phone calls.
It's not the same.
It's not the same.
Not the same.
It's not the same. And with the kids, we're able to, you know, touch base with them when we're away, but it's not the same.
It's not the same as being in the same room.
No.
And you know, we've had an incredible marriage. I mean, I don't mean to brag on it, but we've had an incredible marriage. But the place where our marriage got challenged was when I came home for an extended period of time. when we were together all the time. That's when it got dicey, because there was never, you could never pull the ripcord then, and all of a sudden I was in her space all the time. She was in my space all the time. And, that was where the friction rubs. And, and again, I think we were lucky enough to be smart enough to recognize some of these things, and deal with them, because neither of us, I think it's fair. I think she would think it's fair to say neither of us are really, really great at conflict resolution in that environment. And the special sauce of that made it really hot was that when we were apart for long periods of time, when you get back together, you make a point of not ever having conflict, right? It's like, we only have 10 days together here. This has to be magic for 10 days. And consequently, you get bad at conflict resolution and you get really good at conflict avoidance, and things get pushed down and pushed down and pushed down. And before long, they're going to bubble up, and then you really have to deal with them. So luckily, I think we've been able to head some of that off at the pass a little bit, but that was a real challenge for us, was how to actually argue and have it be okay, have it not torpedo my time at home. You follow me there?
Collision is a good thing when you're not just going in different directions and hoping it works itself out.
I love the concept of diamonds come from friction, so, there's got to be an element of that in any relationship. There's, that whole, the whole makeup sex thing is real, right? I mean, it's real.
Yeah. So there's a higher level of both connection and intimacy that happen. And when you're frequently together, you have more reps.
Yeah.
But when you're apart and you come back together, it's almost like a new dynamic. So having a way that you can spend time with that person after you've been away from them. And for me, with my wife, when she's gone, I always pick her up at the airport with the kids, and vice versa. It's the four of us. So the dynamic is not what it needs to be. So we initiate a date night within 24 or 48 hours, even if it's a walk around the block or go get a cup of coffee, because we're not able to communicate the same way when our kids are in the same room as us. And it took some time to kind of figure that out. People often say, friends of mine who have a lot of confrontations with their spouse say, you and your wife, you never fight.
They say the same thing about us.
Yeah. And it's not that we never fight. We have challenging conversations. We may even have arguments, but we're in such alignment because of what we want out of not only ourselves, independence, but also what we want out of our family. Core values are important to us, raising our kids the same way. That dynamic is very important in terms of a long-term relationship, right? Dating, it doesn't quite matter the same way. You're not looking for the same things.
Right.
But when you're looking for a life partner, aside from instantaneously matching eyes with the beautiful girl dancing in the nightclub, how did you know and when did you know that this was a partner you wanted to spend the rest of your life with?
Man, I don't know if I could peg when that moment happened, because it was the connection was so strong, honestly, right from the get-go.
And the connection was strong without intimacy, because you were apart.
We weren't intimate for a long time.
And then you guys did.
That's what I'm saying. All that kind of pretense didn't even have a chance to happen, because we kind of had to connect verbally for the longest period of time. And the life lesson learned there is, the talking, it's a big part of the sex,
Yeah.
I mean, man, when the talking's really good, the sex is outstanding, right?
So what men, those of you who are listening right now, a good old-fashioned pillow talk prior to some sex is a good idea.
It's a good thing, man. Yeah. I mean, we might have really broken all the rules of phone sex in that 3 months, so.
Yeah. And thus the $700, well, you passed out that time, so that one doesn't count. Going on tour can get extremely wild, and I have absolutely zero clue whatsoever, just from hearing stories and watching, shows on TV. But tell us a few of the wild nights that you had. And
man, you are going to get me so busted
with some of the groups and the entertainment that you were a part of.
Well, I mean, it was certainly, it was certainly much more prevalent. And I mean, really, to a degree, out of hand. I mean, it was really out of hand in the 70s and the 80s. I mean, whatever you see on TV, Dude, that's a fraction of it. I mean, it's just a drop in the bucket. I mean, multiply it times 100 and you're still probably not there.
Wow.
You know? I mean, it's a pirate's life. I mean, it's a pirate's life.
Wow.
I mean, port to port, party to party, you know, it's as wild and crazy as you want to make it, you know, or at least it was at that point. I mean, it was out of control. And
did shows ever fall apart because of it? Did you ever find that things would leak over to the next night into production, and maybe not necessarily on your end, but an overall view of the show from one night to a crazy night to the next night?
yeah, but that was all part of it, you know. I mean, it was almost, I don't want to say that was expected, but it was certainly excused, you know, where, I mean, if you had a hangover, or, you know, you were severely hungover and you had to perform the next day. I mean, that's just part of the process, part of the experience there. And I think it was expected not only from the musicians and everybody else, but the people that were coming to the shows were just as out of hand as anybody, you know, at that point. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, you know, the amount of sex that was going on in that decade was really breathtaking. I mean, it was really breathtaking. And, you know, I guess I have the luxury of doing this. I can go back and visualize and kind of relive the mindset that was going on there and try to bring that into today with the Now Me movement or Me Too movement. I mean, and just try to connect those two things and go, wow, man, we are a long way away from what was going on in the 80s there, you know. And it's not to validate it or excuse it.
But there's
in any
been
way.
progression, is what you're saying.
But there's been real progression there, you know. And I mean, I think about so many things that happened there. I mean, you know, obviously we're not going to have any politicians that come out of the 80s. That's for sure, because as soon as any of that comes out, I mean, they're done, you know. So, but it was just a different time. And I've said this many times, and again, not trying to excuse it. I know it sounds apologetic and not trying to excuse it, but if you lived in that world in the 80s, it was just expected behavior. You know, I mean, it was no different than having hors d'oeuvres on the table. I mean, it was just part of the atmosphere that was there, and it was accepted. It was absolutely accepted. Accepted and expected.
And this being a show for dads, about dads, were there any phenomenal fathers that you worked with along the way that were on the road that just went above and beyond? And one of the ones I think of right now, went to a concert last year here, Jack Johnson, big fan, coming from Hawaii, and his wife and his child were on tour. I thought that was pretty cool. I don't, different time, different era.
Yeah, different era. I mean, certainly touring was much tougher in the 80s. I mean, it's so catered to now. I mean, everything from transportation to hotels, everything is so much more set up for it than it was then. But that said, I mean, there were, I think probably, who would I put in that category? I mean, I got to tell you, it's rare. I mean, I have so many male acquaintances that either worked in production or were musicians or whatever, that I mean, an inordinate amount of them, their marriages failed. I mean, they just did not make it, you know. I mean, the ones that have made it and thrived, I could probably count on maybe two hands. Wow. You know, so that's a part of it that is really troubling sometimes, you know. Yeah. And believe me, I mean, I saw so many guys that, you know, I mean, I have some restraint. I have enough self-discipline, or at least I like to believe I do, to be able to recognize when I'm kind of getting off the rails and go, okay, man, let's tighten it up here. Come on, you know. But there are so many other guys that didn't have that ability. And I mean, I lost a lot of friends during that period. Yeah. And, you know, that all impacted how I raised my boys, you know, and my daughter for that matter, you know. So all of those experiences play large as a father, no doubt about it.
And your daughter and you had a very, very unique and special, once in a lifetime is not even the right way to say it, but once in a universe, if you will, you had an opportunity to work with your daughter for a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us about that year and how special it was, and who you worked with and what you guys did, and just kind of frame that for these listeners.
Yeah, it was just one of those moments where, you know, as they say, all the tumblers in the universe kind of clicked into place, you know, and I mean, I had been working for Tom Petty for, 23, 24 years to that point. And again, I got to give Mary Jo credit for it. I mean, here's my daughter has just graduated from college. She was valedictorian at Fashion Design Institute in San Francisco. I mean, just incredible student, incredible success story. And we were just we knew the tour was coming. This was probably 6 months out from the tour, but the tour had been announced and was coming. And Mary Jo just offhandedly says to me one day, why don't you see if she can go to work for Tom? Why don't you just get her on as a stylist or a wardrobe person for Tom, And me I just had kind of this duh moment, of why didn't I think of that? I mean, why didn't I think of that? And then it was kind of followed up with this kind of bunch of nerves, It's like, oh, now I got to go to Tom and ask him to do this, And I went about it really. Me, I'm a preparer. I'm a prepper. I don't want to walk into any situation unprepared.
The first World's Toughest Mudder. It looked like we were preparing to go to the Middle East.
We were, bro.
Yeah,
we were.
Yeah.
At any rate, I kind of reached out to Tom's manager, Tom's tour manager, Tom's valet, honestly, everybody but Tom, and just kind of tiptoed through this process of saying, hey, I think my daughter might work into a good spot on the tour. I know budgets are always tight. Why don't we just, we'll bring her out on the road. If you guys can just pay her some per diem, I'll let her room with me. All of this stuff, really kind of slow walking it in to see if they would go for it, try to get her on as a wardrobe person on the tour, of which Tom has had a wardrobe person for the last 30 years. It's not like I was trying to replace her, just help her out. So I sent off this very gracious email, and week goes by, nothing. 2 weeks, nothing. 3 weeks, radio silence, just on and on. And I'm thinking, I may not have a job. They may just not call me back, just thinking I've gone off the reservation, So about 5-6 weeks later, Richard, the tour manager, I get a call one night late from Hawaii. I'm thinking, who's this? Oh, it's Richard. Okay. Hey, Rob, I want to talk to you about your daughter. I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. This is going to go good. I could just feel it coming. And he was like, yeah, okay, so we've talked about it. And what we want to do is we just want to make her a full crew person. We'll give her a slot on the tour. We'll give her own room, all the stuff. We'll pay her this, and he gave me the figure that they were going to pay her. My daughter's going to kill me now if she hears this. He gives me the figure and I'm like, Richard, dude. I mean, this girl's never been on the road in her life, And I'm looking at this figure. I was like, dude, you know how long I had to work to make that kind of money?
That's great.
And I was like, serious. I know you're doing this, hopefully because you love me, trying to do me a solid here. But I said, please hear me out as a father here. You cannot pay her that much money.
Wow. Yeah.
You got to make her earn this a little bit. If you want to bank the difference and give it to her as a bonus at the end, okay.
Well, yeah.
If she makes it, if she cuts it, great. I thought I was being such a good dad.
Yeah. And how many, just to put into perspective, how many tour cities was there in that year in that lineup?
Oh, probably close to 70. I mean, it was a long tour. I mean, it was going to be a year-long tour for sure. So, I mean, it was the real deal. So, kind of cut to the chase here. Yeah, they end up hiring her. They agree to the salary, the whole 9 yards. I mean, I'm over the moon. I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. But at the same time, I had all this kind of apprehension thinking, okay, this is going to be hard. You're thinking about your daughter then. How do I protect her? How do I make sure I set her up to succeed here? She's never done this for a living. This is going to be her first day, and she's going to start at the very top here, right? So we get out there, and I saw it right away, and I kind of know this about my daughter. She is an overachiever. I mean, she is an overachiever. She is a preparer like I am. So the first day happens, and one of her jobs is to set up all the dressing rooms and get all the road cases in place and blah, 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 blah. All this really kind of logistical stuff. And we had been through rehearsals, and we got to the first show, and she did it. And then we come in the next day, and normally the wardrobe person would come in about 10 a.m. She was there at 6. And came in with the riggers and had all set up and kind of ready to go. And Richard comes into the show, and he pulls me aside and he goes, come here for a second. And he pulls me out the hallway. He goes, look at this right here. He goes, we've never had anyone do it like this. Never. He goes,
Day one.
Day one. He goes, she's getting the full salary. Sorry. I'm going to override you, Dad. She's getting the full boat here. And then over time, of course, she just kind of crushed it, and they let her into the production office, started having her do catering, all these responsibilities, you know, for this 21-year-old kid, you know. So yeah, she crushed it, to say the least.
How did you present her with her comp plan? Did you call her, or did you see her in person? How did you tell her that? Because that's got to be a cool thing to come home and tell her what the opportunity that you all created for her.
Yeah.
But also what they decided to do on the back end.
Yeah. It all kind of came about really organically. I mean, I'd love to tell you there was a big, presentation of it, but it was just kind of like, yeah, they accepted it. You're going to go. And to her credit, you know, I mean, this is her in a nutshell, just calm as a cucumber. Yeah. Okay, great. When do we leave? Can I go get a new suitcase? Yeah. Let's go down to REI. We'll pick you one out. You know, I mean, it was just matter of fact, didn't even blink an eye. Let's go. You know, that's just what she's like. She's just so nimble. I mean, she can just react to anything and take it on. And
you got through the entire tour year? Was pretty close?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah. I mean, she became a staple in that. You know, as the father in that situation, you know, you're always worried about, okay, I'm going to toss her in the mix with these old salty road crew guys. You know, truck drivers, bus drivers, road crew guys that have all lived through the 80s. And now my daughter's in the mix. Yeah. Right.
Was she the youngest one on tour?
Oh, by far. Wow. By far. Yeah. And I knew it was going to go good. We had this one guy on our bus, Chinner, if you're out there, I'll give you some props here, who is, you know, the crusty of the crusty. I mean, he's just one of my dearest friends, but he is a rabble rouser, you know, and I just remember thinking, okay, how he treats her on this bus, because we were on the same bus together. That was the other part of it. She was going to be on the bus with her dad, you know. Oh my gosh, you know, what's going to happen here? Because she's going to see a side of me that never would you see it at home, you know. So, but how she handled Chinner was really the magic, you know, like he because he's one of those tester guys, you know, he'll throw funny things out just to try to get you riled up, and she would just have none of it, you know. She would just put him right back in his place in minutes. And of course, the surrounding crew guys saw her do that, and then they rallied around her, you know. So it was magic, man. It was just totally magic. It was, and for me, it was just the dream come true, because, you know, the Petty Tour in terms of scheduling wasn't real harsh. I mean, you were going to have a day off every couple of days in a city, and we would go out every day off and explore the city, coffee, record shopping, connection. It was just every day.
When you'd come in the gym a few years back, I would often play a Tom Petty song or two, not realizing that you had listened to it a million times and that you were really not in the mood to listen to that.
No, I was okay with that.
Obviously, Tom's passing affected you and a generation of people. I think I shared this with you a few weeks afterwards, that I grew up listening to Tom Petty through my mom. And when my mom passed away, it was like he was my way of reminding myself of that time growing up and reminding myself of her growing up. You know, Free Falling was the ultimate song. I think I was like 6th or 7th grade, listening to it and having my mom tell me, like, she was in Ventura and there was a freeway in the backyard. Like, that was her life. And Tom passes away at the end of the tour. Looking back on that now, obviously there was some emotion there. You lose a friend.
Oh, yeah. I'm still processing it. I mean, not a day goes by I don't think about something that he and I talked about or an interaction we had. Some days it takes me out. But every day, I've said this before, every day the sun shines a little brighter now, and I can put a little farther behind me. But, the guy completely changed the trajectory of my career and my life. So, there's no escaping that, he was a tremendous, I don't want to say role model. It's a weird way to say it. But I looked up to him, and I there was an integrity to him that I kind of gleaned very, very early on in our relationship that was really attractive. He said it. I've quoted this a couple of times. I remember very early on at one of my very first rehearsals with him, they were going through songs, and one of the guys in the band, after one of the passes of a song, kind of piped in and said, "Yeah, I thought we did that pretty good." And, without even kind of hesitating, he kind of looked over and he says, "We aren't here to be pretty good. So let's do it again." And I mean, it was just such an off the cuff remark, but it was really, really what he was about. He was not about just being okay. He wanted to do something special and significant every time he stepped on that stage, So that was a cool thing to be around. If you become the 6 people you hang out with most, he's one I would want in my circle.
Wow.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. And you had a chance to do some guest DJing on the Tom Petty Show on
I did, yes.
XM Radio?
Yeah, that was really, really exciting. I mean, they asked me to guest DJ an hour and a half show, and I got to tell a few stories and just kind of give some insight on it. And
how'd you pick the lineup of music that you played?
Oh, it was just favorites. I mean, try to pick your favorite out of those catalogs. I mean, I came at it from a little different angle than most people that guest DJ on the show, because I only really worked with him in concert sound. I only did his concert sound for the 25 years. I didn't really, even though I did tons of recordings for him, they were all live recordings. So I decided to stick 100% to live music during the hour and a half. So, there was always stories and stuff, historical things about the thing that, I wanted to pull in and kind of get across. It was really fun. I hope they asked me to do more of them. I would love to do it.
That's awesome.
I had a great time.
Music is obviously a huge part of your life, but for the non-musical engineers, the non-musicians like myself, music is a part of my life. It's a part of my day. I start my morning very early with a voiceless meditation, and whether it's American Indian music or it's the Gladiator soundtrack or it's classical, my day starts with music. And I give myself permission to listen to voice music in the afternoon once I've sort of gone through my day, and I want mental clarity with instruments, not people speaking and talking. And every part of my day has some type of music.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. What does music mean to you? And then we're going to get super big and grand and deep, and in this context of like, there are people out there who are suffering. There's a big part of this message to be about ending personal suffering for men so that they can be a active, present, and engaged father in their life, whether they're married or not, whether they're entrepreneurs or not. This title of Fatherhood will be with you until you're no longer here. How does fatherhood and music tie itself into your life? Especially with your kids? What were you playing with them? What have they taken and listened to in their own life? And as I think about my own mom, every morning that I'm cooking breakfast in the kitchen, Alexa, play Bob Marley. So my kids say, "Do you listen to anything else other than Bob Marley?" And I say, "Yes, I do. But what I know is with Bob Marley, there's going to be a positive message." Yeah. So if my morning starts with that, after the meditation, then I know my kids are going to grow up with a piece of Bob Marley in their life. Yep. Tom Petty, Bob Marley, the Beatles, Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones. That was kind of the core of what my mom did. And you've seen my mom's record collection. And you were the man that said, and if my wife's listening now,
you're going to get me in trouble now.
He's the reason why we have that record collection still. We were looking at selling these records a couple of years back. And I said to you, "Hey, what do you think? What do I do? Would I put them online, eBay?" And you were like, "You can't sell any of them." And it stuck with me for a long time as, the rebirth of analog and, vinyl being played and processed and created now in factories all over the world. I've taken my daughter to see so many amazing concerts and music. It's such a huge piece of my life.
Look, here's the thing. It's funny because Tom and I have talked about this countless times, and he's even quoted as saying this. So I'm gonna quote him on it. I won't take the credit for this. Music is one of the very few magic things. And for me, I can tell just from talking to you, I know this is the case for you. Music is one of these rare things where it is the soundtrack to your memory bank, right? We can all relate music, especially in our younger years, to a time, a very, very specific time. I remember hearing that song when I was doing this, right? your kids are going to have exactly that same experience. And I'm going to give you my version of your kids' experience right there. When I was growing up, there was a radio on top of the refrigerator out of my reach that was on a country and western station. And every morning that we got up, that radio was playing country and western music. I mean, I remember every song that probably came out of that radio from the time I was 5 years old till I was 10 or 12 years old. And it set the tone for me. I mean, I could give you so many experiential things that happened later when I was mixing music. I might be mixing a piece of music that Tom was doing and thinking, oh my gosh, that's Furlan Husky. Hang on, I know how to, it was just like, it took me right back. I know that piece of music. Here we go. So it's one of the few things that we experience in our life that can mark time. Movies don't mark time for us. Movies mark eras. Music marks specific times. I remember being in the car with the girl while that song was playing. Those things happen. So music, it holds a really, really special place for me. Music's one of these things. I mean, it can heal, it can inspire. I mean, we know, it's not an accident that we use certain types of music in workouts, right? Because they can get you over the line.
Elevate.
It can totally elevate, right? How is that possible? It's just a collection of vibrations and words. What's happening there to push me over the line? Because we have an emotional connection to it, Funny, it was a funny thing with this. Talking about that very thing, I'll give you this little story. I listen to KTAR sports radio sometimes, and I always listen to Doug and Wolf in the morning. And, Wolf is, Mr. Heavy Metal. It's all Tool and, all these other acts that are, just, soaking in
System of a Down,
manhood.
Rage Against the Machine. Yeah. Yeah.
So somehow, I don't know how they got on the conversation one day, but somebody said, wait, I know what it was about. I'm sorry. I remember. They got on the subject of at Gator Stadium in Florida of them singing I Won't Back Down at the halftime. Like the entire audience sings I Won't Back Down at halftime. And the coach was talking about how inspiring this was. And Wolf was having none of it. How can you be inspired by a Tom Petty song? Blah, 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 blah. That's not going to inspire toughness, And I couldn't resist. I had to tweet him. And I tweeted him, and this was, after Tom had shown some incredible physical fortitude of doing an entire tour on a broken hip, So I tweeted Wolf and I said, Wolf, toughness, and you know this as an athlete, toughness does not come from the body. Toughness is in the mind, right? Anybody can be tough regardless of their physical activities. And I said, I've been with Tom Petty for 25 years. I can tell you he's probably one of the most mentally tough people I have ever been around. And he responded to it, and he was like, yeah, you're right. You're totally right. Toughness has nothing to do with physicality and, all these things. I said, you can't write a song called I Won't Back Down and have it be meaningful and mean it without that kind of toughness being real. You just can't. It just wouldn't work.
It's also coming from an era of music videos, which I grew up on.
Yeah.
Right. So before XM and satellite, and you watched videos of your favorite acts performing, and that was a phenomenal video. That and Mary Jane, I think it was.
Mary Jane's Last Dance.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. What do you listen to now, and what are your kids listening to that you might like? Now, and I say it like this: my daughter she was born with a musical ear. I've caught her singing since she was 2, 3, 4 years old. And it's frozen for me a moment in time of like always wanting to be a father and growing up and having this little angel sing in the house. And even today, she starts her morning getting dressed, kind of singing.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like a dream to me. So she listens to some, Ariana Grande, that kind of thing. And I can dig it. Mom went to a concert with her. My son's musical ear is wretched at this point in the game. And I grew up in this 90s hardcore rap, right? Like I was gangster rap growing up. And some of the stuff he's listening to is pretty bad. Is there anything your kids are listening to that you can dig?
Well, I let them listen to whatever they want to listen to.
Yeah, I don't stop that. I was fourth grade NWA. I remember being on the bus. So when my son heard the song, I think last year, he's sixth grade, mom flips and I'm like, babe,
No,
I was fourth grade.
let it go.
Let it go, right? Don't ever want to be that parent, which all of our parents were for their generation of music. Elvis was considered wild
Without a
back
doubt,
in the day.
without a doubt.
Right?
I mean, burn your Elvis records, burn your Beatle records. It's all. That's part of history. Carly is probably the most balanced out of any of the three, meaning she's open to a much wider range of music. She's definitely out on the new age of music. She's lots and lots of new artists. Ethan is way more grounded in rap. Like he likes really hardcore rap. I mean, that's what he is all about.
New stuff.
New stuff. Yeah. Well, new and old. I mean, he's
a little bit of both.
He'll take the old as well. But he knows all the current rappers. He's pretty well versed in it. It's pretty impressive what he knows about it. And Jackson is really more into the metal thing. Like he's really taken on drums now. Like he wants to play drums. So he's in. We hear him every day in the studio with the drum kit, and the things I hear coming out of there, I'm like, holy shit, man. I mean, I was just like, how is he doing it? I mean, it's like impressive because he's doing all this double bass drum stuff, Korn, Tool, all of this really heavy stuff. And then they're just kind of throwing down and getting it, So he's definitely on the heavier side, no doubt about it.
As you look back on your life right now, knowing you got a lot of decades left, man. I mean, shit. Seriously, I'm not going to ask for your age, but based
it's okay,
on,
man. I'm proud of it. Are you kidding?
Yeah. How old are you today?
58. Yeah. Just coming up on 59.
So if the target for us high performers is 100 to become a centurion, you got 42 years. You got 4 decades.
Oh man, I don't have enough money to make it 42 years, bro.
Regardless of your time left on earth, you've delivered quality, and not just to so many people who, and I say this with all the most respect, don't know what you're doing on the back end of music production, but so many people who have heard so much of the music that you've been involved in, your kids, your family, people who you are on the road with, all of the people that you've touched. What is the golden thread in the message that you want to leave behind, knowing that all we can do is live our life to the fullest and hope that what we've done will carry on beyond our life here on earth? What is that message? What is that golden thread for you?
The golden thread for me probably is, if I have one little mantra that I try to really, walk, is live, learn, share. There's nothing to be gained by living and learning and holding on tight to it. You got to share. If you can make the other person's human experience better, why wouldn't you do that? And just my experience, whenever I've done that, and I've done that my whole life, that has always come back to me tenfold. People, because I've been so open and willing to share and not hide anything, et cetera, that's come back on me tenfold. It's really, really blessed my life in many, many ways. So that's the one thing I try to get across to my kids is just, I tell my kids all the time, there's 3 words that'll get you really, really far in this life. Please, thank you, and I'm sorry. Get those 3 out with some conviction and some meaning, be accountable. Man, you'll go a long, long way with those 3.
Yeah. It's amazing how hard that is for this, I'm going to say this younger generation, but my kids in this, 10, 11, 12 age, I can guarantee you that my son's friends who cannot look me in the eyes and shake my hand are going to have a much harder time at experiencing life than our kids. And that was like one of the first values. If you ever meet my son, if you see him again, he will turn to you. He will look at you.
Oh, I've done it many times. Yeah, it's so impressive.
That was like phase 1. If you can't master that, how are you going to master things like calculus and algebra and dating and real estate and, everything that we're going to eventually have to deal with as a young kid, a young man growing up? They can't shake their hand and look him in the eyes.
I think it's I think that is a serious challenge for society going forward. How many more clues and cues do you need to see it? I even see it with my youngest, Jackson, and even Ethan to a degree, but not near as much. I mean, he is an isolationist, to get him to engage you, is really a challenge, Incredibly smart kid, incredibly bright kid, incredibly creative kid. But man, it's all behind a shell right now, it's isolated. And I'll say I was kind of that way, not to the degree that he is. I see myself, little bits of myself in all my kids, we laugh about it all the time. It's like these 3 kids have had the same parents. They've all lived in the same house. We fed them the same food. They could not be 3 more different people. It's an amazing thing to experience.
Yeah, don't fight that, dads. That is who and how they are, and you just have to let them be themselves. I know that with having a son and a daughter, they're complete opposite ends of the spectrum. And oftentimes we feel it when they get into arguments because they're, my son is a straight edge and my daughter is more like my mom and myself, just a free flowing kind of energy that doesn't hold on to anything. And my son can get super agitated and aggravated and, stress himself out to the point where he'll get cold sores. Yeah. And then say on top of it, which we know we can counterbalance with mindfulness, I'm getting cold sores because you're upsetting me. And then what does that do? It produces more cold sores.
More cold sores. Yeah. I struggle with that with Jackson sometimes because he's been like this, honestly, since he was a baby. Maybe it had something to do with being a 10-pound 7 baby, Wow. But he can get set off into anger really, really quick and just spin himself right into the ground. And it's been so hard to get across to him, and I don't know that I've succeeded at yet, is that you have the choice of whether you want to get angry or not. You can choose how this is going to go. You're not a victim of what has just happened to you. Choose how you want to respond to it, And, hopefully with some maturity and some age, he'll get better at it. And he has. I should, in all fairness, say he has gotten better with that over time. We have, I'll let you in on this. We have, in his room, he punched a hole in his wall.
Oh, yeah. Remember those days.
So we took the opportunity of not patching the hole, but framing it.
Powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Think about this now, what can happen when you don't have control over that, or you make the choice to be angry, right? So, if there's one other thread I really always wanted to get through to my kids is don't ever be the victim. You always have the choice of whether you want to be the victim or not. And I think they know from dealing with me, I don't know about Mary Jo, but dealing with me, they never get away with that with me, playing the victim. I'm like, no, come on, get up, let's go.
Own it.
Yeah. Let's go.
In the pre-show, we talked about crossroads, and there's a few times you've talked about these 4 or 5 times in your life that you felt that you're at a crossroads. What does this next crossroad look like for you?
Man, I'll tell you, it's one I've been processing for a while now because, and you have this coming, I'm going to sound like somebody's dad here. I'm going to sound like your dad here. But, at the age of 50, you just start feeling things differently. Physically, your body starts reacting differently. Emotionally and mentally, you start to process things differently. As much as I fight it, I cannot fight it. Where all of a sudden my thoughts start gearing toward, well, what am I going to do when I'm not doing this anymore now? Because there's going to come a day when this is going to shut down. My profession is going to shut down. I'm not going to do it anymore. What then? That starts to happen. And then it's like, well, okay, physically, I can't do the things I used to do, even though I work very hard at staying in shape and love to do events, et cetera. The writing is on the wall. It's like, wow, I can't jump like I used to jump. Can't run like I used to run. And those things are hard to process, and try to knit that together and see how it's going to impact you, later in life, So, does that sound like victimization? I hope not. But, I try to own it and keep a hold of it. But, like as weird as it sounds, as mortal as it sounds, the end is out there. You can see it now, and it's kind of like, and this, there are always triggers for it. Like in July this year, I lost 3 very, very close friends of mine. They were my age or just a little bit older, a little bit younger, all road guys, all did essentially what I did for my entire life that are gone now. And they just went, no sign of it coming. One of them was ill, but the other guys, like one of the guys that passed away, I mean, he did it in my worst possible nightmare. Hotel room, just did not wake up. You know, at some point you start processing that and go, I'm not going to allow that to happen to me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow that to happen to me. You know, if that means I got to stop doing that for a living, and, you know, it's not like you're trying to take control of dying, but it's like, well, I can take control of it enough to know I'm not going to let that happen to me.
Yeah. I'm
not going to be out on tour somewhere and die in a hotel room. You know, can't imagine what a family must go through when that happens, you know. And, you know, you and I have talked in these terms before, you know, and it just becomes so much more acute. You become so much more acutely aware of it the older you get, as tomorrow is not promised. Tell them you love them. Try to get them to tell you that they love you. I mean, get those things on the table, man, because it is not promised. Tomorrow is not promised.
Yeah, we talk about those 3 words, I love you, a lot on this show, and oftentimes in the coaching I work with men, you know, there was no father in my life, and because of that, my mom gave me a lot of love, right? She doubled down on love, and I grew up in that, even though I had some rage for a few years of trying to find a way out of being the victim, is what I thought I was for a long time, growing up without a father and, you know, not having a role model. Love has been our focal point and our centerpiece in raising our own kids, to the point where we might say, I love you 10, 20, 30 times before we leave the house together in the morning.
Dude, I can't even get my kid to say good morning.
Well, it's shifting now. It's definitely shifting now. Your father in your own life.
Yeah.
Did he tell you that he loved you?
Yes. But it came later. You know, it's funny. I was thinking about this on the way over here. You know, I'm just kind of comparing the two. You know, you and I have probably had, in terms of our parent experience, I mean, we have got to be on the complete opposite ends of the universe there. You know, I mean, I had 2 parents my entire life. You know, both professionals, both, you know, I mean, they were just there for me all the time. I clearly would not, well, at least I don't think I would be sitting here today without their influence. And my mother and father were 2 very, very different people. And, you know, I think I probably recognize more of my mother's influence in me, but that's not to say that my father's influence is not in there. I don't recognize it until the bad times, you know. I think that's my freaking father coming out in me right there. You know, I see it in my kids, you know, things where and I think every teenager grows up with this, things of, if I ever have kids, I'm never going to do that. And then you have your kids, and all of a sudden you realize, I'm doing that.
Brush your teeth, wash your hands, hang up your backpack. Every day after school, I'm like, oh my gosh, I sound like a broken record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not even just that. Like my father, I mean, my father was a big man, for one. I mean, he was 6'7".
Wow.
6'7", probably about, in his heyday, probably about 240, 250. Wow. I mean, this is a big man, big man. So when he spoke, you did. I mean, it wasn't up for debate. We aren't going to rationalize this out, anything like that. This is what I want you to do. I expect it to get done. I'm going to move on. I mean, it was that, you know, it was, and he was, I mean, I love my father to death. He was a horrible teacher. You know, I had no patience, you know, just one of those things of, you know, come and help me work on the car, expected me to know everything that he knew, you know, and it drove me away from that, you know. And my mother used to get so upset with my father, you know, when that was going on. And this all kind of played itself out actually later in my life, when I was in my 20s, where we really had a collision. But it was, you know, that was the example of one of those things, you know, if I ever have kids, you know, I'm going to be there to teach them the right way and be patient with them and blah, 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 blah. So I'm overtly conscious of that, overtly sensitive to it when I'm trying to teach my kids something. I don't want them to perceive me as being, it's an overly dramatic term to use, the monster. You know, I want them to see that I'm on their side and I'm trying to help them. How do you think that went?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, especially my 2 boys. Yeah. anytime I try to help them with something, the minute it says, well, why don't you try this? What's the response? Quit yelling at me. Right? That's like, I mean, it just crushes me when I hear that. I don't think I'm yelling at you, you know, I'm just trying to, you know, or if you're critical about, hey, you got to get your homework done, you know, but quit yelling at me. You know, you're always yelling at me. It's like, nah, I'm about to give you some yelling. If you really want to see what some yelling is, I'll show it to you. But, you know, boy, that's a really sensitive nerve for me, you know, is to not have my kids perceive me that way, but it didn't work out.
Yeah. Yesterday, my daughter couldn't find her shin guards leading up to practice. She calls me for 2 hours, literally every 15 minutes. And I said, listen, they were in the garage next to your backpack. Remember, you took them out of your backpack because you wanted to use your backpack for summer school, and then you didn't put them back in. So it turns into this downward spiral, this literally 90-minute shit show. Then I come home and I'm in problem-solving mode where let's look together. We don't find them. We find the old pair. The old pair aren't suffice. She doesn't want the old pair.
Yep.
And before you know it, she's crying and I'm in another room, and it all comes back to original statement of don't take the shin guards out of the backpack. But I often say, look, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
It's true.
So let's find a solution together, right? And then I start to go into the mode of like, stop being entitled and spoiled, right? Which is like you have a pair of shin guards and you have a pair of Nikes and you have 2 parents at home. And often I'll catch myself.
I was wondering if you were ever going to go there.
Oh, I do that. And I have to catch myself of like, these kids did not grow up in my house.
Yeah.
And they didn't grow up in mom's house. They're growing up in this
their house. Yeah.
So I can't belittle them that they have it so great because I see it as so great. But they just see it as, look, I got 2 people who tell me what to do all the time.
That's, you know, if there's a money takeaway from this conversation, it's that. Because I go through the exact same thing of just like, boys, do you understand how good you have it here? You're living in North Scottsdale. I mean, is there anything you don't have, you know, et cetera? You know, this kind of guilting them then into, you know, not taking things for granted. And it's just so unfair. It's unfair. This is the experience you gave them. Why are you criticizing them for it?
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, I have to catch myself on that one for sure at times and back off and go, okay, well, how do we just make this experience more meaningful, right? How do we make this more, you know, offset?
Understandable too, right? Understanding, right? Like, look, let's solve this together. Let's not yell. Don't need to cry. Your shin guards are missing. Let's find them. And if we can't find them, let's use the backup pair.
And how do we let this not happen again? You know, that's the one.
Yeah.
What can we learn from this situation?
The $1 million question.
Right.
You're a big content creator. You're also a big reader.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now?
I just finished McCraven's book on his SEAL experience. The guy who wrote Make Your Bed. This was the kind of the follow-on to that, talking about his whole experience.
Which is a phenomenal YouTube video if you haven't seen it.
Yes.
I believe he gives a keynote presentation at University of Texas, graduating class a couple years back.
Yep.
And he talks about no matter what your day looks like, if you start by making your bed, you will have won the battle of the day.
You accomplished your first thing, right? Yeah, it really spoke to me, that whole concept. And I think part of that comes from kind of the environment I grew up in. I mean, my mother was a registered nurse all of her life. I mean, I come from a whole family of first responders and caregivers and things like that. Everybody was in the military. I think that's why some of the fitness stuff that you turned me on to spoke to me so deeply, was that it gave me a feeling of what they might have gone through. And you always kind of, I think as a man, at least for me, I always had this thing of, I need to find out whether I could have hacked that. I need to know how I would have responded to that, and do those sorts of things. I think that's where a lot of those challenges are born from, is, putting yourself under fire and seeing how you respond. That's it for me anyway.
Once the body shuts down as well.
Yeah.
Right. Because we know that's coming.
Yeah.
And you talked about it early. The mental side of it is the only side that matters.
It's the only side that matters. When you're halfway across the bay at Alcatraz, there's no getting out of it. There's no getting out of it. You are going to survive it, or you are not going to survive it. And that was attractive to me. I wanted to get to that point. I mean, we talked about it at the first World's Toughest, not to go completely off the topic here, but that I got injured right before that World's Toughest. And I had that kind of moment where it was like, well, you can either stop and just say, we'll come back next year and do it, or we can just go to the edge here and see what I'm capable of. And when I asked the question, I knew what the answer was going to be. It's like, yeah, I'm going to do world's toughest on a broken ankle. Here we go.
Which, by the way, you did. And you got 30 miles in?
35 miles.
35 miles, which, if you do not know, the World's Toughest Mudder is a sister parent group of Tough Mudder, which is a fun obstacle course race. Except the world's version is the 24-hour version, which means you set up on a track that has been designed with multiple obstacles, anywhere between 20 and 30 obstacles throughout the course, 4, 5, 6 mile course in water, land, dirt, sand, mud. And you go as long and as far as you can. Yeah. Until you decide to stop. And you could take breaks and rest, which we did. But ultimately, it is a test against your own will to see how many miles you can complete in 24 hours. And you talk about game changers and crossroads, these crucibles that I've inserted in my life that I know you have as well. Those are timestamps.
Yeah, they are. And, they're more than timestamps. The one thing I saw at World's Toughest that changed me was, when you're there, if you're really paying attention, you can get what that event is about. And it is not about athleticism. Because I saw a lot of athletes quit. That thing is about mental toughness. It is about getting through it regardless of how bad you're doing. And I had just a microcosm moment of that in that first year where it was probably 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And we were going up the peg wall.
Dark, cold, wet.
Soaking wet, freezing. And it's a peg climb, right? Do you remember it? Mm-hmm. It was right before the muscle up move, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And there were 3 or 4 people at the wall with me, but there was this one mother that was there. I'm assuming she was a mother. She was a middle-aged woman, pretty heavy. And I watched her for a minute and I just thought, oh, I wonder if she's going to make it over this wall. And she would not stop. She would not stop until she got over that wall. And I helped her over. Another guy helped her over. And, at one point we got about halfway up and she was going to get down and I could just feel it in her grip, everything. She just went, no, I'm coming over this wall. And it just made me kind of think, that's what this is about right here. I mean, it's a metaphor for life right there. I am not quitting. I am not quitting. Not going to happen.
And that entire message about not quitting is really what this podcast is about in terms of being a father of the future, a fatherhood, being a dad, being a super dad, call it what you want to, but this show is committed to bringing guests on to have real, raw, authentic conversations about the realities and the struggles and the challenges and the highlights and the ups and the downs and the all-arounds that we face as fathers. Being that we will own this position for as long as we are here on earth. My man, Robert, it's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you. It's been a long time coming, man.
I know, right?
It's been a long time coming. How can the listeners learn more about you, subscribe to your vlog, your podcast? What is it, and how can they know where you're at?
I got quite a few little social media outlets going right now. The first place I would send you is I have a website called robertscovill.com. It's Robert, SCOV as in Victor, ILL.com. On there you can, I have it on there for as much as my career as personal things, but, I've contributed to hundreds upon hundreds of articles and blogs and all of that. It's all being housed there. It's not complete yet. I'm still putting up content on it. You can, of course, reach me on my YouTube channel. I have lots of content on there, some of it professional, some of it personal. Of course, Facebook and Twitter. You can follow me there, robertscovill.com, Robert Scovill at Twitter, Robert Scovill on Facebook. If that's not enough Robert Scovill for you, I don't know what's going to do it for you.
It's been a phenomenal journey together, and it's only the beginning, man. One of the things I'd like to leave the listeners with is that when you said it yourself, when you surround yourself with people, 5 or 6 of the closest people in your life, you become them. I have learned so much from you, and you've been a client in a business relationship years in the past, but ultimately this respect level that I have for you and that I believe we have for each other is monumental in the journey as a father and as a man. Because when you surround yourself with people who have experienced something, I don't have teenagers yet. And I know what that was like a few years back as you and Ethan were training together at the gym.
Talk about not quitting, man. I mean, you're gonna run into some storms with those teenagers. And I think one of the most important messages you can send to your teenager, regardless of how bad it gets, because with my middle son, it got pretty bad, is that I am not leaving you. I'm not quitting. We're in this. We talk about it all the time. Stay in the fight. Stay in the fight. I'm here with you. We're going down together. I'm not going to depart from you here. And I think teenagers, especially boys that can get in a little bit of trouble, they need that message, man.
Yeah.
Need it.
Beautifully said. Guys, if you extracted some value from this podcast today, I would truly appreciate it with all gratitude and love to subscribe, to like, to comment, to follow, to do whatever it takes to not only get more of this message yourself, but to also share this message out to the masses. It is my purpose. It is my dharma to be able to live this life as a father, but also share it with other men around the world so that they can not only improve their game as the position of father, but so that they can improve their game in their life, their body, their mind, their spirit, their relationships, their business, and their musical culture. So I appreciate you for being here today, brother.
Thank you for doing this, man. You're changing the world. I've said this to you before. You just don't even know it. You're changing the world. So keep it up, brother. I'm proud to shake your hand and call you a friend.
Thank you, my friend. One
Thanks.
love.
See ya.
See ya.